Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. Ethan and I grew up together as childhood friends. From the time we were little, we never went more than 3 days without seeing each other. But ever since I confessed my feelings to him, he started avoiding me. He even went so far as to hire bodyguards to keep an eye on my every move. As soon as I appeared within a 1-kilometer radius of him, they would immediately remind me to leave. That became the phrase he repeated the most to his bodyguards and friends. So as he wished, I stopped chasing him. Instead, I agreed to go on blind dates with the men my parents introduced and eventually got married. Yet the same man who had worked so hard to avoid me suddenly wouldn't leave my side. "Mom, I'm free this weekend. I can go on that blind date you mentioned." Holding my phone, I finally made the call home. Because of Ethan, my marriage had been delayed for 3 years. Hearing my voice, my mom sounded overjoyed. "Really, Anna? That's wonderful. I'll arrange everything right away. I'll find you someone tall and handsome. Once I confirm the location, I'll send you the address. I'm so happy you finally came around. You know your father isn't getting any younger and his health isn't great. His only wish now is to see you get married while he still has the energy to help take care of your future children." Hearing my mother's words, my eyes welled up with tears. I had spent 3 years chasing after Ethan, disappointing my parents' expectations, but in the end, all of it was for nothing. Ever since I confessed to him 3 years ago, he had been avoiding me. Now, seeing him even once felt more difficult than reaching the heavens. If I counted the days, the last time I saw him was 13 days ago. Our companies were collaborating on a project, and he had no choice but to meet with me. "Anna, I didn't expect to see you here. It hasn't been that long, but you've gotten even prettier." His words were always smooth and empty, but his actions made his boundaries crystal clear. Since we were at work, I forced myself to suppress the urge to get close to him and pour out my feelings. I endured it until we finished discussing business and signed the contract. As soon as he was about to leave, I couldn't hold back anymore and stepped in front of him. "Ethan, since we signed such an important contract today, why don't we have dinner to celebrate?" He kept his eyes on his phone, not even bothering to lift his head. "I have plans." But I clearly saw what was on his screen. He was chatting with another woman. "Sweetheart, you signed the contract today. As a reward, let's have dinner together." "Baby, you're amazing. I have a big appetite. We should have a feast. Eat whatever you want. Either way, I'll have my fill tonight." The suggestive conversation made my face flush, but despite that, I still couldn't help bringing up my family pressuring me to get married. "Ethan, I'm not getting any younger. My family wants me to settle down soon." He casually opened his car door, his gaze never lingering on my face for even a second. "Then just get married." "I want to marry you, Ethan." I clasped my hands behind my back, my fingers nervously twisting together. Once again, I confessed my feelings, completely unaware of the growing darkness in his expression. "We grew up together. We've known each other all our lives. Our families wouldn't object," I rambled on, caught up in my own thoughts. If he hadn't cut me off, I might have even started talking about our future children. "Anna, I've only ever seen you as a little sister," he said coldly. "I have never considered marrying you." He took a deep drag from his cigarette, and then blew the smoke directly in my face. The acrid scent choked me, making me cough violently. I stumbled back, gasping for fresh air. Ethan knew I had asthma. He knew I couldn't tolerate cigarette smoke, yet he still chose the cruel way to reject me. "Anna, just look at you, weak and sickly. What makes you think you're worthy of me? I really don't want to be disgusted by your oxygen-deprived face while I'm in bed with someone else." My thoughts were suddenly interrupted by an employee at the mall. "Miss, we checked the security footage. Mr. Ethan left half an hour before you arrived." I had originally come to see Ethan one last time to say a final goodbye, but as expected, he had already anticipated my arrival and left before I could find him. "Miss, do you still want us to track Mr. Ethan's whereabouts?" I hesitated for only a second. "No need. If he doesn't want to see me, then forget it. After all, when I get married, the wedding invitation will eventually reach him. Sooner or later he'll find out." Since I had finally decided to stop chasing after Ethan, I returned to my small apartment and started packing my belongings. It was time to move back in with my parents. 3 years ago, just because of one casual remark from Ethan, I had moved out of my family home and lived alone. But when the 3-year mark finally came, I worked so hard to find him again just to ask if he still meant what he had said. Ethan, I've already lived on my own for 3 years, just like you asked, and I've proven that I can take care of you and myself. Do you still mean what you said back then? When I brought up the past, Ethan's expression showed no trace of recognition. He even asked, "What did I say 3 years ago?" His question left me speechless, but clinging to my last shred of hope, I reminded him, "You said that if I could live independently for 3 years, you would consider being with me." After my reminder, Ethan finally seemed to recall, but he only chuckled, waving a hand dismissively. "No need to consider. I refuse." I let out a quiet sigh. Deep down, I had already predicted this outcome, but knowing it in advance didn't make it hurt any less when I finally heard it from his mouth. I silently walked out of the private dining room. Behind me, I could still hear Ethan's unrestrained mockery. A random comment I made 3 years ago, and Anna was dumb enough to take it seriously. I don't even remember saying it, yet she actually had the guts to come and ask me about it. My apartment wasn't large, so it only took me half a day to pack everything. Near my suitcase, there was a black bag filled with jewelry and stuffed animals, gifts from Ethan over the years. But now, I didn't want any of them anymore. A knock sounded at my door. I opened it and handed the black bag to the person outside. It was the second-hand dealer I had contacted. All those gifts Ethan had given me throughout the years were expensive luxury items, but since I no longer wanted them, I figured I might as well sell them. Just as I was dealing with the transaction, my best friend arrived. The moment she saw me, her eyes widened in shock. "Anna, are you crazy? These are your most treasured possessions. How could you just sell them?" I turned to her with a calm smile and showed her my phone screen. The payment had already gone through, over $1 million. There's no point in keeping those things. This money is much more useful. But those were Ethan's birthday gifts to you. Every year you've kept them for over 20 years. If he finds out you sold them. Suddenly, I found myself hating the sound of his name. Without hesitation, I grabbed my best friend's hand and pulled her toward the door, cutting her off. "It's done. No point talking about it. You don't tell him, I don't tell him. How would he ever find out? Unless, of course, you're planning to betray me just to please him." She reached out and touched my forehead as if checking for a fever, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. "Anna, you actually got over him. Is this real? Does this mean you're finally letting go of Ethan?" I forced out a bitter smile. Even if I can't completely let go, what's the point in holding on? Instead of letting myself get hurt over and over again, it's better to give up early. I've moved on. From today onward, I'm a new Anna, and I've already agreed to go on blind dates and get married. My best friend was so stunned that she couldn't even speak for a long time. "Let's go," I said lightly. "I just made a little fortune. Dinner's on me tonight." I never expected to run into Ethan again at the restaurant. What was supposed to be a simple dinner with my best friend ended up turning into a gathering with our entire social circle. I sat quietly on the couch, completely at ease. Unlike before, I didn't cling desperately to Ethan. He sat in the corner of the private room with a woman by his side. The two of them were deep in conversation, completely immersed in each other. Our friends, whether intentionally or not, kept steering the conversation toward me and Ethan. Everyone here knew I had chased after him for over 20 years. In reality, this gathering had been arranged as a chance for them to persuade Ethan to make amends with me. But no one had expected that he would bring another woman along. The lingering smoke in the air made me cough lightly. My friends knew I had asthma, so they were always mindful about smoking whenever I was around. Everyone except for Ethan. He took a long drag from his cigarette, before pulling the woman in his arms. Into a heated kiss, my best friend couldn't hold back her anger anymore. She glared at Ethan. "You know Anna has trouble breathing. Can't you at least be a little considerate in an enclosed space like this?" Ethan exhaled a mouthful of smoke, deliberately blowing it into the woman's face before shooting me a provocative look. "If you can't handle it, stay away." I'd rather not have you gasping for air and blaming me for it. My best friend was about to say more, but I held her back. Instead, I quietly changed seats, moving as far away from Ethan as possible. Under the dim lighting of the private room, I thought I saw his expression shift for a brief moment. I'm sorry, Anna. We didn't expect Ethan to act like this, one of my friends said apologetically. It's fine. It's actually perfect timing. I haven't seen you all in a while, and who knows when we'll get another chance to meet again. I was laughing and chatting with my friends, reminiscing about childhood memories when Ethan suddenly appeared beside me. He stubbed out his cigarette, his tone casual and mocking. What's this? Are you planning to leave the country? Or are you just pretending we don't exist? What do you mean you don't know when the next time will be? The room fell into silence. I thought about it for a moment and then calmly said, I'm going on a blind date soon. My family wants me to get married. I didn't want Ethan to misunderstand. I didn't want him to think I would still cling to him or still love him. My words made everyone exchange looks of surprise. Anna, you're still so young. Why the sudden rush to get married? I held the teacup in my hands and took a slow sip. I'm not that young anymore. I'm almost 30. Ethan, who had been standing beside me this whole time, suddenly stiffened. Even without looking up, I could feel his gaze fixed on me. His voice was laced with disdain. Pathetic little trick. Anna, do you really think I'd believe this? If you have the guts, then go ahead. Go on the blind date, get married. Don't think that by playing these games you'll catch my attention. You know me well enough to know I don't fall for this kind of act, and honestly, it doesn't suit you. I had no idea what Ethan was thinking. Ever since I confessed to him, he had always dismissed me, but today he was acting strangely, going out of his way to speak to me like this. I stood up, meeting his gaze directly. Ethan, don't worry. I won't chase after you anymore. I won't try to get your attention. If anything I did before ever caused you trouble, I apologize. For the first time, Ethan didn't respond. His lips pressed into a tight line, his brows furrowed, his expression unreadable. I picked up my bag and turned to my friends with a soft smile. Sorry for ruining the mood tonight, but when I get married, I expect all of you to be there. Then I walked out of the private room. Ethan remained where he was, his posture relaxed and unchanged, but as I stepped away, I faintly heard his voice from behind me. What an act. She's just trying to make me chase after her. He really thinks she's some kind of treasure. Please, I don't fall for tricks like that. I shook my head and left, returning to my apartment, pulling my suitcase behind me. I finally went home. As soon as I stepped into my parents' house, my mom rushed toward me and wrapped me in a tight embrace, her eyes brimming with tears. For the past 3 years, I had rarely returned home. Every time I did, I feared that my parents would pressure me into going on blind dates and getting married. But this time, I brought it up myself. Mom, you already arranged those blind dates we talked about, right? I'm free tomorrow. My mom beamed. Of course, everything's set. She even pulled out her phone and showed me a collection of photos. Take a look, Anna. See if there's anyone you like. I couldn't help but chuckle and randomly pointed at 2 photos. Just schedule them at a normal pace. I'll get married soon enough. The next morning, I arrived at the tea house my mom had chosen. I never liked coffee, but I had always loved tea. The process of brewing it always made me feel calm and at peace. It's been years, but you're still the same. You still love tea. I looked up and saw the man sitting across from me, Daniel Way. Memories flashed through my mind like a reel of film spinning backward. Daniel, when did you come back? Daniel had been my senior in college. Later, when I pursued my master's degree, we ended up under the same professor, but soon after, he chose to study abroad. Not long ago, he said, smiling. Didn't expect to run into you first thing after coming back. Talk about fate. The joy of our reunion made me momentarily overlook the flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. But before I could respond, the door to the tea room suddenly slammed open. Ethan stormed in, his face a mix of anger and panic. Anna, what the hell are you doing? Who is this guy? I looked at him curiously, unable to understand where his anger was coming from. Finally remembering the long-standing relationship between our families, I forced myself to smile and introduce Daniel. But before I could finish, Ethan cut me off. No need for introductions. I know who he is. Daniel slowly stood up, a smirk playing on his lips. Long time no see, Ethan. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. Daniel Way, it's you. What the hell are you doing here? Daniel's expression remained calm as he spoke in an almost teasing tone. You really don't know why I'm back? He leaned in slightly. You made me a promise, and you haven't fulfilled a single part of it. The tea room fell silent as Ethan and Daniel locked eyes, neither willing to look away. I had no interest in whatever unresolved matter was between them. Checking the time, I realized my first blind date was about to arrive. I had no choice but to ask them both to leave. Daniel, Ethan, I have some personal matters to take care of now. Please excuse me. But I never expected what happened next. Daniel reached into his coat and pulled out a bouquet of roses, placing them in the vase on the table in front of me. Anna, he said with a soft smile. I am your first blind date today. I froze in my seat, caught off guard. I quickly picked up my cup and started making tea to mask my anxiety. Clearing my throat, I said, I didn't expect it to be you, Daniel. After a pause, I forced a light-hearted chuckle. But since it's you, I don't think we need to go through with this. I remember you had a girlfriend, didn't you? Daniel cut me off immediately, his gaze locked onto mine. No, I never had one. I was stunned. I wanted one, he continued, but she never agreed to be mine. At that moment, a long-forgotten memory surfaced in my mind. The night before Daniel left the country, he had been drunk. He pulled me aside and said a lot of things I hadn't taken seriously at the time. But among all his drunken words, 3 stood out. I like you. Back then, I thought he was talking about someone else. He had described a girl who didn't have bangs, someone with outstanding academic achievements. That wasn't me. Besides, at the time, my heart had been completely fixated on Ethan. I hadn't even paid attention to who he was really talking about. But now, for some reason, my instincts told me that the person Daniel had liked all along was me. I didn't know how to respond. Before I could even process my thoughts, Ethan, who had been silent until now, suddenly erupted. Anna, what the hell do you think you're doing? Snapping out of my daze, I turned to look at him in surprise. Ethan, why are you still here? The moment the words left my mouth, his expression darkened. He instinctively took 2 steps back, as if my words had physically struck him, his back hitting the wall. I couldn't be blamed for my reaction. Ethan had barely been present in my life these past 3 years. He had gone out of his way to avoid me. The idea that he would voluntarily linger in the same room as me for this long was unthinkable. And yet here he was. He had always been able to walk away without hesitation, putting as much distance between us as possible. But now his voice carried a sharp edge. Anna, what do you mean by this? Are you saying you don't even want to see me? I looked up at him in confusion, my eyes filled with uncertainty. Wasn't this the outcome he had always wanted? Why was he suddenly so angry? Still, I patiently explained. I'm in the middle of a blind date right now, Ethan. Please don't interrupt me. You should leave. I don't want to leave a bad impression on my date. Ethan stared at me in disbelief, as if he couldn't comprehend the words that had just left my mouth. You're actually talking to me like this? You're going on blind dates behind my back. I forced a smile at Daniel, not wanting my failed love story of the past 3 years to become public knowledge. Daniel, please excuse me for a moment. I need to step outside. Without giving Ethan a chance to react, I grabbed his arm and pulled him out of the tea room. Ethan, what is your problem? I asked in frustration. I was very clear at the gathering that night. I told you I won't chase after you and any more. I'm going on blind dates, I'm getting married, so I need you to stop interfering in my life. He didn't say a word. I wasn't interested in dragging this conversation out any longer. Without another glance at him, I turned back and re-entered the tea room. Daniel was still seated properly in his chair. The moment I returned, he straightened up and introduced himself formally. My name is Daniel. I studied abroad for 3 years and recently returned home. I own a house and a car. I immediately interrupted him, flustered. Daniel, come on, you don't have to do this. Why not? He asked unfazed. Since this is a blind date, Shouldn't I properly introduce myself? That's how these things work, right? Now it's your turn, Anna. Why don't you introduce yourself? I hesitated for a few moments, then finally recited the introduction I had prepared in advance. What started as a seemingly formal blind date carried a subtle undercurrent of personal emotions. But before I could think too much about it, the meeting came to an end. As we were leaving, Daniel turned to me with a soft smile. Anna, I'm very satisfied with you, but what about you? How do you feel? His voice was steady, his tone sincere. If you ever need my help, you can reach out anytime. I nodded and walked him to the door, but to my surprise, Ethan was still outside waiting. I was about to close the door when I heard his low voice, almost like a plea. Don't go. Let's talk. I checked my watch and said flatly, you have 10 minutes. I have another blind date coming up. Ethan opened his mouth, struggling to find the words. It took him a long time before he finally asked, why are you suddenly in such a hurry to get married? I calmly poured myself a cup of tea, letting the warmth soothe the lingering frustration in my heart. I want to get married, so I'm getting married. I'm not that young anymore. What's so sudden about it? His lips parted slightly as if he wanted to say something more, but I didn't offer him tea. I didn't give him any explanations. For once, I didn't cater to him. Ethan stared at me in silence. In the entire 10 minutes, that was the only question he asked. Time's up, I said, placing my cup down. Ethan, please leave. My next date is about to arrive. That day, I met with 4 different men. By the time I got home, I was more exhausted than if I had worked an entire day. The moment I stepped through the door, my mom rushed over to greet me with excitement. How was it, Anna? Out of the 4 men, did you find anyone suitable? If not, I have more options. I quickly interrupted her, shaking my head. Today was enough, Mom. No need for more. She gave me a thoughtful nod, but didn't press the issue further. As soon as I finished speaking, I escaped upstairs and collapsed onto my bed. But before I could even settle in, my phone started ringing. I had 2 numbers. One for work and one for personal use. Not many people knew my private number, so I answered, thinking it might be something important. Ethan's voice came through the receiver. Anna, I want to talk to you about work. I leaned back against my pillow, expression indifferent. It's after work hours, Ethan. If it's about business, call my work number during office hours. There was a brief silence on the other end before he finally spoke again. But you weren't at work today. You were on blind dates all day. I stared at my phone, internally cursing Ethan. What the hell was wrong with him? For years he had avoided me at all costs, and now he wouldn't stop bothering me. He hadn't called me once in the past 3 years, but today he decided to break that streak. I sighed and said flatly, I forgot to tell you, if it's about work, talk to my dad. I'm on leave. Not wanting to explain further, I hung up. But before I could even set my phone down, it started ringing again. I answered, my patience wearing thin. Ethan, can you not? I already said talk to my dad about work. A chuckle came from the other end of the line, but it wasn't Ethan's voice. Is that Ethan who just called you? Hearing the familiar calm tone, I finally looked at the caller ID. It was an unknown number, not Ethan's. I felt a little embarrassed. Sorry, Daniel. I mistook you for someone else. If that's the case, why don't you join me for dinner? It's been a long time since we last caught up. I couldn't find a reason to refuse. Daniel kept switching between talking about our old friendship and casually mentioning my blind dates from earlier. Fine, I agreed. Send me the location. I had no idea if Ethan had planted some kind of tracker on me. When I used to look for him, I could never find him. He always knew in advance and disappeared before I even got close. But now that I wanted nothing to do with him, he was everywhere. The moment I arrived at the restaurant Daniel had chosen, I ran into Ethan. His expression was complicated as he looked at me. Anna, didn't you say you were busy? I nodded without hesitation. Yeah, I have dinner plans with my blind date. That counts as being busy, doesn't it? Ethan's face darkened, his expression growing increasingly stormy. His friends tried to smooth things over, laughing awkwardly. Come on, Anna, you're joking, right? Blind dates. Let's not kid around. If you keep saying things like that, we might actually believe you. I cut them off, my tone serious. I already said at the last gathering that I was going on blind dates. This is my date, my senior Daniel. The atmosphere turned ice cold. Ethan clenched his jaw so tightly that I could see the tension in his face. Enjoy your meal, I said, uninterested in dragging this conversation out. I have other things to do. Without hesitation, I grabbed Daniel's hand and walked into the private dining room. My friends didn't know how to comfort Ethan, but Ethan just stood there, his gaze locked onto our intertwined hands, teeth clenched in frustration. Over the next few days, Ethan kept finding reasons to contact me. I had no choice but to block him. It was almost identical to how he had once treated me, ignoring me, shutting me out completely. One day, Daniel and I had plans to visit our old professor together. I had just settled into the passenger seat of his car when my phone rang. It was my dad. "Anna, do you have time right now?" he asked. "The contract you renewed with Ethan's company, there's been a complication. You need to come handle it." I frowned, already feeling reluctant. "Can't you deal with it, Dad?" But my dad said, "That boy from the Davis family specifically requested you. You signed the contract, so you have to be the one to negotiate." I exhaled slowly and hung up, then turned to Daniel apologetically. "I'm sorry, Daniel. There's an issue at work I need to take care of. We'll have to reschedule our visit to the professor." Daniel, ever understanding, nodded. "That's fine. I don't have anything else planned right now. I'll go with you." When we arrived at the company, Ethan was already in the conference room. The moment he saw Daniel, his expression darkened. "Anna, this is a business matter between our two companies," Ethan said coldly. "There's no need for an outsider to be here." His hostility toward Daniel was obvious. I had no interest in entertaining his tantrums. "Just get to the point, Ethan. Daniel isn't an outsider. If you won't talk, I have other things to do." Ethan's jaw tightened, but in the end, he exhaled sharply and got to the point. "The project site we're working on requires a foreign architect for the design. I've already contacted someone, but we need to go in person to finalize the deal." He paused for a moment, then continued, his tone shifting ever so slightly. "Anna, you've always said you wanted to visit Paris. This is the perfect opportunity. We can get the architect on board, and you can finally have the trip you always talked about." I hadn't expected Ethan to remember that wish. I had made it 2 years ago on my birthday. Back then, my wish had been simple. I had wanted to go to Paris. More specifically, I had wanted to go with him. I couldn't help but glance cautiously at Ethan. Back then, when I had brought up the idea of going to Paris, he had dismissed it without a second thought, saying he had no time. But not even a week later, he took his secretary there instead. If he hadn't mentioned it now, I would have forgotten about it entirely. "Well," I said flatly, "I have no interest in going to Paris anymore." Ethan's hand trembled slightly, but he quickly pressed his lips together and said, "Whether you go or not doesn't matter, but this contract requires that professor's involvement. If we don't show sincerity, he might not agree to it." At that moment, I realized just how shameless Ethan could be. For years, I had been the one clinging to him, completely disregarding my pride, and now he was the one using cheap tactics just to get me to go abroad with him. I let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh. "I'm not going. I don't have time to waste. If you insist on hiring this professor, then go ahead." And before I could finish my sentence, Daniel interrupted me. "If it's a professor from Paris, I can help." Daniel made a quick phone call, and in no time, Ethan's expression turned dark without saying another word. Word he left the company. Daniel caught my curious gaze and chuckled. "Oh, I forgot to tell you, I studied abroad in Paris. I have connections with those professors." I tilted my head, blinking in admiration. "Wow, Daniel, that's impressive." A few days later, the professor from Paris actually arrived. Daniel and Ethan were both busy accompanying him, handling the negotiations. Meanwhile, I had nothing to do, so I decided to visit my old professor. Last time I had planned to go with Daniel, but circumstances got in the way. This time, I figured I should make up for it. "Anna, you haven't visited me in a long time," my professor greeted me warmly. I felt a bit guilty. It was true. I had neglected many things in the past 3 years, pouring all my energy into Ethan and forgetting about everything else. I'm sorry, Professor, I said sincerely. That was my fault. From now on, I'll visit more often. He laughed heartily. No need to visit too often. Who knows, maybe you'll be the one getting tired of me first. I gave him a puzzled look, but before I could ask, he changed the subject. I heard you've been spending a lot of time with Daniel lately. That's good news. I instinctively blushed. It wasn't the first time my professor had tried to match me with Daniel. Daniel is an orphan, my professor continued. He's always been sensitive, but he's a great man. He'd make a good husband and an even better father. Back then, he left the country for you, and now he's given up everything just to come back to you. His words left me shaken. I had never known the real reason why Daniel chose to go abroad. Walking out of my professor's office, I felt as though I had lost my sense of direction. I pulled out my phone and called Daniel. Where are you? Having dinner with the professor. Why, I miss you, I said softly. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard the sound of rushing wind, followed by Daniel's slightly panicked breathing. Where are you? I'll be there right away. I'm at my professor's apartment complex. Wait for me here in 10 minutes. Not long after, a car pulled up in front of me. Daniel got out hurriedly, running toward me. He grabbed my shoulders, his hands quickly checking me over, his brows furrowed in concern. I couldn't help but laugh. This idiot probably thought something had happened to me. The next second, I heard him let out a deep sigh of relief. Anna, you scared the hell out of me. I thought something had happened to you. I leaned against his chest, not resisting the warmth and security Daniel gave me. Ethan had never once made me feel like this. Daniel, I murmured. Did we know each other before? I felt his body stiffen instantly. A trace of nostalgia flashed in his eyes before he finally nodded. Yes, he said. But you forgot about me a long time ago. But I always remembered you. He hesitated before adding. In fact, you were my savior. Daniel had grown up in an orphanage. When I was younger, my parents used to take me along whenever they donated to the orphanage. At that time, I had been a wild little tomboy. A long boy with messy hair was always more reckless than the others. One day, I helped a small boy at the orphanage, protecting him from the other kids who bullied him. After driving them all away, I proudly announced to the entire orphanage, from now on, he's my little brother. If anyone bullies him, I won't bring you snacks anymore. Daniel's eyes turned red with emotion as he hugged me tightly. Anna, you don't know this, but back then, you were my angel. I found myself lost in the memories Daniel had brought back to life. The details from childhood had long since blurred, but as he carefully pieced them together, they resurfaced vividly in my mind. You were pretty ugly as a kid, I teased, tilting my head at him. Not nearly as handsome as you are now. Daniel let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. I thought back to the night before he left for abroad, the drunken words he had whispered to me. So Daniel, everything you said back then, it was all true? His gaze locked onto mine, unwavering and filled with sincerity. Of course it was true, he said. Anna, I would never lie to you. That night, my mind was in turmoil as Daniel drove me home. I never imagined that someone had been silently loving me from the shadows for so many years. Honestly, I never planned on telling you any of this, Daniel admitted. But now that you found out, I won't deny it. Still, forget about the past. What I want is for you to love the person I am now, not out of guilt or as some kind of compensation. I didn't know how to describe the emotions surging inside me. It was something Ethan had never given me. Growing up in a world driven by profit and transactions, I had learned that every favor required a return. If someone owed me something, they would pay me back in the form of a contract or a deal. But Daniel, his love had never asked for anything in return. I lay in bed, tossing and turning until 3 o'clock in the morning before finally falling asleep. The next day, I slept until the evening, only to be woken by a series of phone calls. It was my best friend inviting me to a gathering. When I arrived, I realized it was less of a gathering and more of an intervention. There were quite a few friends present, and Ethan was seated at the head of the table. This was his doing. He knew I wouldn't accept his invitation directly, So he had used my best friend to lure me here. Ethan smiled, pulling out the chair beside him. Anna, you're finally here. I've been waiting for you. Come sit. Without hesitation, I swapped seats with a friend sitting near my best friend. You sit there, I said firmly. You all know I can't stand the smell of smoke. Ethan smokes too much. It's better if I sit by the window. Ethan's face darkened instantly, and for a fleeting moment, there was a trace of sadness in his eyes. This was the consequence of his own actions. The karma of his past cruelty had finally come back to haunt him. Sensing the tension, my friends quickly started chatting again, trying to liven up the mood, making excuses on Ethan's behalf. I found it laughable. They really think words could undo everything, so I cut them off with a short, decisive statement. I'm getting married. The table fell silent. I want to thank everyone for looking after me all these years. I continued, in a few months I'll be getting married. Right now my fiancé and I are finalizing the wedding date. Ethan froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. His voice rose. You're marrying Daniel? I didn't deny it. I simply nodded. Anna, why are you marrying him? He demanded. Do you even know what he's done? He gave up on you once. If you marry him, you'll only end up hurt. He didn't give up, I said calmly. He just chose to love me in a different way. But you, on the other hand, made a deal with him. I cut him off, my voice unwavering. Then you avoided me like the plague. Ethan stood there momentarily speechless. After a long silence, his voice came out hoarse. So you know everything? Daniel had always known about my feelings for Ethan. That was why, all those years ago, he had made a deal with Ethan before going abroad. At the time, Ethan's family company lacked expertise in a crucial foreign technology. Daniel had gone overseas specifically to study that technology, only to return and gift it to Ethan's company. His only request was that Ethan treat me well. But you broke your promise, didn't you? I said, my tone light but firm. Ethan, you have no right to say anything bad about Daniel. The only person who ever wronged me was you. I won't cling to you anymore, I added. And I hope you won't cling to me either. Ethan collapsed into his chair, drained of all strength. The rest of our friends fell silent too. They felt sorry for Ethan, but they all knew he had brought this upon himself. But he's so much older than you, Ethan muttered, grasping for any reason to change my mind. I shrugged. What's wrong with that? Older men know how to take care of people. You know I have asthma. I need someone who will actually look after me, someone who wouldn't think I was a burden, someone who wouldn't blow smoke in my face just to spite me. Ethan's eyes turned red in front of all our friends. His voice trembled. I'm sorry, Anna. Back then, I didn't mean to. It's fine, I interrupted gently. I stopped caring a long time ago because someone who no longer mattered to me had no power to hurt me anymore. I stood up, ready to leave. Ethan covered his face with his hands, his fingers trembling as tears slipped through the gaps. As I stepped out of the room, I could still hear his repeated murmurs of regret. But so what? I would never turn back. The news from that night's gathering quickly reached Daniel. When he found me, he seemed anxious, shifting uncomfortably as if struggling to find the right words. I knew exactly what he wanted to say, but I couldn't resist teasing him a little. What's wrong? I asked, feigning innocence. If there's nothing, I'll be on my way. Daniel panicked, grabbing my hand before I could walk away. You told all our friends that we're getting married, he blurted out. Are you planning to back out now? I arched an eyebrow, but no one's even proposed to me yet. How can we skip that step and go straight to talking about a wedding? Daniel fumbled clumsily, quickly pulling out a ring from his pocket. He placed it carefully into my hand, his voice soft yet firm. I designed this ring myself, he said. I've kept it for years, waiting for the right time to give it to you. Then he dropped to one knee. Above us, the sky lit up with fireworks of brilliant color. Marry me, Anna, he said. I swear I'll spend my whole life loving you. Later, at our wedding, that was the last time I saw Ethan. He looked exhausted, his body thinner, his entire being hollowed out. It seemed like a strong breeze could knock him over. Congratulations, he said, smiling faintly. I nodded. You're not young anymore either. I hope you'll be next. Ethan smiled but said nothing. It wasn't until later that I heard from my best friend what had really happened. After I sold all the birthday gifts he had given me, he spent an unimaginable amount of effort tracking them down, buying each and every one of them back. He drank himself into stomach bleeding, and if his friends hadn't found him in time, he might not have survived. Even during surgery, he kept muttering under his breath, "Anna, why did you stop chasing me? I need you to chase me. If you just say the word, I'll marry you anytime." Some people only realize what they've lost when it's too late, but the consequences of his own choices were his to bear. As for me, I was already living a fulfilled, happy life.